Today, we're going to talk multi-threading. We're going to give you guys some very, very tactical things to really increase win rates by involving the right types of people in your deals and get access to certain types of folks, whether that be your economic buyers, building champions, spotting blockers, etc. We have some great speakers today. We got Richard Harris, who's the founder of the Harris Consulting Group. Krysten Conner, recently out on her own as well, founder at KrystenConner.com. Colin, we've had on the show a bunch of times from Orum, VP of Sales. And if you're coming across our stuff for the first time, my name's Jason Bay. I run a company called Outbound Squad where we do sales training, coaching, all of that kind of good stuff. So before we get to the content today, I had two quick things I wanted to announce. One, want to thank our sponsor, Orum. I think the thing that I love most about this tool, outside of the obvious thing that you can do with, you know, dramatically increasing the volume of calls that you make, is the virtual sales floor. So if you're running a remote sales team right now, being able to get them into an environment where they have a virtual sales floor and you guys can make calls at the same time and replicate that kind of in-person call center environment that I kind of grew up in sales, it's pretty awesome. So go make sure to check out Orum. And then last but not least, Richard, if you guys like a lot of the stuff that we're about to talk about today around multi-threading, Richard just came out with a book that's awesome. It's called The Seller's Journey. Richard, you want to give us just a quick 30 seconds on the book? I'll drop in a link where people can find it,
Thank you.
all that
Um,
kind of stuff.
yeah, so there are two things to know. One, the very first sentence has my email address because this is the only book, sales book, any book that comes with a money back guarantee. If you don't like it, if you don't like what I have to say, if you think I'm full of shit, I will Venmo your money back. So that's the first thing. The second thing is there's a ton of tactics in there. There are things like things that we were never taught, like negotiating with procurement and how to handle the competition question without getting frustrated or scared, and just tons of really strong tactics. And then to me, the most important part is about bringing the humanity back into sales, and most importantly, that it allows us. The first chapter is, yeah, I'm in sales. Yes, I am. So let's talk about it, because we actually change more lives and help more people than any doctor or lawyer in the world, like combined. They can combine all their stuff. We help more people than they do. So we should be proud of that fact.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jason. I appreciate you letting me plug it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's awesome. I mean, for $10 on Kindle, I mean, it's a ton of value. So go make sure to check out that link in the chat, The Seller's Journey by Richard Harris. And let's get to the content today, you guys. I'd love to just throw a question out to the audience. Let us know in the chat. There's quite a bit of data on this, actually, from a couple different sources, but what percentage of deals are single threaded, meaning that the deal you're working, you have one point of contact? Let us know in the chat. What do you think? What percentage of deals are single threaded, meaning that you basically work with one person through the entire sales cycle? And we were all over the place. The med says 85%. We have some 0%. If it was 0%, you guys, for those of us that help with sales training and coaching, we might not have a job or a business if it was 0%. So we're kind of all over the place. So I think this would be a good place to start. There's a couple different stats from LinkedIn, but 78% of reps report being single threaded in deals, and 93% of deals are not multi-threaded with more than 6 people. So there's some zooming in that we can do on that 93% stat, because is it 6 of the right people? Because who you're multi-threaded with is definitely important. But all of the data shows us, whether it from user gems, what you're seeing here is that typically the more contacts we get in an opportunity, the higher the win rate. So when we go from 1 to 5 contacts in a deal, I mean, the win rate literally increases by 2 to 3x. Gong's got some interesting data around closed won deals. In the second call, they typically have 3 or more people invited on that second call versus 1.27 for closed lost deals. So let's kind of start here. I threw out a couple data points. There are a lot of single threaded deals, and there's a lot of good guesses here that we saw in the chat. I'll go ahead and kind of kick the first question your way, Krysten. what do you think are some of the common challenges or misconceptions? And maybe we should define multi-threading. Actually, might be a good place to start. What is multi-threading, and what are some common misconceptions in your experience on how reps approach this?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think one of the things, sometimes it's easy to define something by what it's not. Multi-threading is not mass emailing everyone who is involved in a deal. Like, that's a way to have no one respond to you and get no intel. What multi-threading is starting individual lines of communication with the people who are going to influence your deal. And that's at all levels of the organization, right? So not just decision makers. I think that's another thing that people get wrong. They think, well, I only need to multi-thread to executives. That's a mistake, in my view.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit more about that, because Richard, you have sort of an interesting take on this too around multi-threading, and that I think we're oftentimes told as a rep, our sales leaders will say, "Is that deal multi-threaded? Are you multi-threaded? Go multi-threaded." Right? You're
Right.
like, okay, cool. And then a lot of people are like, okay, cool. So that means if you sell sales training, I need to email the CRO and let them know
Right.
that we're having a conversation. Um,
Right.
what's your experience? Because you work with just like I do, like a very wide variety of
Yeah.
companies selling into a lot of different personas. But what does this mean to you? And you have an
Yeah. So
interesting take on this as well.
the first thing is anytime an executive tells me to go get multi-threaded, this is why I don't play well in the sandbox with others. I'd be like, yeah, can you teach me how you do that? And they didn't know how to do it. Right. So
Yeah.
there's this misconception that this is an easy task. That's the first thing. The way I look at multi-threading is uh, understanding as I talk to people, well, who else is affected by this decision? I don't even care if they're a decision maker or not. And to a large extent, for most of us, we already know, right? There's going to be a an end user committee that decides if they like it. There's going to be a vendor selection committee. There's going to be a legal committee. There's going to be a pricing and negotiation committee. So we kind of already know. The key piece is to ask early on, first, second call, like when you make decisions as you go forward, how does your organization like to make these decisions? Don't worry, you'll get to the people, right? You want to understand how they make those decisions. And because in each of those groups, there are skeptics, right? So that's the first thing. The other thing I would say is even at the end of a first meeting, and then I'll shut up, I promise. At the end of every first meeting, I should be ending it and saying, hey, Krysten, I know when we're done, you're going to go take this back to your team. By the way, Krysten, who on the team's the most skeptical when you make these decisions, and what are they skeptical about? Because if I don't get through the skeptics, I'm never getting to the decision maker. And this does a couple of things. One, it helps me understand who those blockers are. Two, it shows Krysten that I got her back. It says, hey, Krysten, I know you're going to become a ping pong ball. You got to go. I know you got to go talk to someone. What can I give you that's going to help that skeptic? Right. And sometimes the skeptic is the decision maker. They are. But in the beginning, I really don't care who the decision maker is. It really doesn't matter. I need to know who all the skeptics are.
This is it's such a counterintuitive approach, because we always think like getting to the power VP, SVP, C-level executive,
Mm-hmm.
and oftentimes they're just following the lead of what the managers and directors and the heads, or depending on what you're selling, some of the ICs and people using the software product, they're mostly going to follow what they want as long as there's a good problem justification for it. Like, do we actually have a business problem that this can solve? And the people that I've put in charge and trust to do this, like, what do they think? That's what a lot of good executives will do. Um, okay, let's dig in. I want to get pretty tactical here, and then I'll kick this next one your way, Colin, because I think
Okay.
there's some interesting areas, and I just dropped into the chat. These are the 5 areas that we're going to talk about and cover today. One is taking the lead. So why we shouldn't wait for the buyer or our champion to kind of tell us everything. We should come in with recommendations and be consultative in this area. We're going to talk about champion building, selling the outcome versus the deal. So how to kind of position multi-threading as a benefit for the buyer, leveraging give to gets, and then for the leaders on board here today, how to reinforce this. Uh, So Colin, I'm curious just at like Orum, when you're working with your team, one of the things that we talked about in preparation for this as a best practice would be this idea of I should kind of generally know how a good deal comes together. And not every deal is going to come together exactly the same. But can you tell us a little bit more about like when you're thinking about with your reps, like this concept of reverse engineering a deal so that I can come in with a recommendation to give the buyer versus just asking them, oftentimes, a rep will say something like, or be taught to say something like, who would feel left out if they weren't invited to, and you always get a bad answer to that question when you ask it in that way. But tell me a little bit more about this concept of taking the lead, knowing how a good deal comes together, and being able to provide a recommendation.
Yeah, no, Jason, thank you. And this is something I know Krysten and I were jamming on in the prep call. And you like to your point, right? It's understanding how they make purchasing decisions or how they tackle initiatives internally, like what the politics are. And you also know historically from all the customers that you've brought on in your company, whom is typically involved, and thus you can start to prescribe or recommend who they might want to consider bringing into that next call. And that can be a great test of the champion, that initial first test of the champion to see, number one, do you have someone that you're already speaking with on that first call or second call that is kind of sizzling with excitement about what you do and their willingness to clue you into the additional stakeholders at their business that would be getting involved. And so you can start to recommend, hey, typically when we've seen customers come on board with Orum, we know that they need to bring, let's say you love what you saw today. Typically, the next step is you're bringing in your head of RevOps, who needs to be the technical evaluator. Your head of marketing or demand generation is the budget, for new technology that impacts pipeline part of their purview, or is that more under sales? So you can kind of clue them in and kind of lead the witness based upon what you've seen work well. And I actually wrote down something Krysten said last time was, really like painting the picture of like a VP of sales start these things, and then Mark, your VP of marketing, and John, your VP of RevOps, will surely want to get aligned. Where do you think this problem falls within their priority list, right? Engaging not just the person you're speaking with, but the other stakeholders that you've already researched their names and who they are, and then the person can start to kind of correct you as you're deconstructing the hypothesis of how you think this deal will go.
Yes. So I think there's a really good pro tip and some action for any account executive watching this. Review your last 10 closed won deals. Like, how did they come together? Who was involved? What was the kind of the sequence and the order that might have happened? Krysten, can you comment on this? Is, I think, a really big part, but it takes extra work, like the research and doing some light stakeholder mapping prior to coming into a call so that you can refer to people by name.
Yeah.
Which I find, the thing I always say is it's easier to correct than to educate. It also just shows that you put in some work. But what type of research are you doing prior to that initial call around who you think might be in the buying committee?
Yeah, and that's kind of to your point, one of the first things that hopefully your org is telling you, like, hey, these 3 departments are typically on our buying committee, right? It's typically sales, marketing, and ops, or it's typically finance and HR and IT. Like, hopefully that's the first thing, because if reps have to figure that out, they shouldn't be spending their time doing that. But sadly, some of you will. So like Jason's exercise of figure out who was involved. But whenever we come to that meeting and say, Jason, it's great to get your perspective today. Appreciated talking with you. Typically, when folks want to move forward, the next step is we talk with Valerie in HR, and then we talk with Sam in finance, and then we talk with John in IT, because they all are going to have some skin in this game, and we don't want to get to the end of it and then have somebody pump the brakes and have somebody be surprised. But, every org is different. How does that sound to you? Because sometimes there's gonna be a person who has a title that you wouldn't have no idea would be involved in that decision, but they've been there for 20 years or whatever. And so then that's the time for the person to correct you. But they feel more comfortable doing that when you've already done some homework, because that's psychologically telling them like this person comes prepared. They don't feel like it's easier to correct than to educate.
Yeah, it engages law of reciprocity too. It's like a person's willing to put more work in it when you can show them that you're attempting to understand. And Richard, what are your thoughts on this when you think about the stuff that happens prior to you even hopping on a Zoom or Teams call with a prospect in terms of knowing how a good deal comes together, who should be involved in those deals, how to kind of almost approach this in a collaborative way with the buyer?
Yeah.
What are your
So
thoughts?
I think it's great to have to do this research, and over time you actually know it, right? Like Krysten was saying, hey, look, generally speaking, it's someone from marketing and someone from here. And I like the idea of asking about the departments rather than the people. When you ask about what department it is, people are more willing to share versus who are the people from these departments. That could also just be a Richard style thing. That could just be my style. So if you're comfortable asking, don't change just because Richard showed up. So I think that homework piece matters. I also think too is, again, even going deeper at some point to say, if you think about the other people on your team who could be affected by this, if they were here today, what questions would they be asking? And again, this is going deeper. It's getting into, again, I'll just use you, Krysten, as I'm trying to get into Kristen's headspace a little bit, to show that I want to hear it from her perspective, because she's going to answer that question, not only based on what she thinks they would say, but based on how she's going to have to go present it back to that person, because she's going to ask the question they would have asked if they were here. So doing that homework pre-call is helpful. The other piece is knowing which questions you're going to ask, right? At some point, it's not, we already know the 5 departments. So great. Well, what questions am I going to ask? And have them written out so that you're ready to go. So you aren't, quote unquote, shocked by this. We shouldn't be shocked by the number of people anymore involved in a decision.
Yeah, love that question too, because it invokes a story. If the other people who were affected by this were on the call today, what would they have to say? It's so easy to lean in, or much easier, excuse me, to lean in and be curious with that question, and for someone to really have dialogue with you versus, hey, Richard, so who makes the decision on this?
Yeah.
It's like,
nobody's going to tell you that.
like,
who cares?
Yeah,
I'll get to them later.
They talk about putting the person on the defense too.
Right.
Okay, so that's kind of step number 1, you guys, in terms of take the lead. The action steps there are, you should generally know, even if your org is not providing it to you, how do closed-won deals come together? Who is a part of those? What's the sequence in which people typically get involved? I need to come prepared and kind of know some of the stakeholders by name or potential ones so that I can invite the prospect to correct me. And then I need to have some questions prepared. So if we start to get into the next part, when we actually hop on the call, in that first call, let's talk about champion building, because I think a lot of what I see on LinkedIn is people talk a lot about objection handling and closing deals and running demos and doing all this other stuff. And all of that stuff's great, but you're probably not going to win a big deal at least, without a champion. And it's something you should be thinking about from the very onset. And I think we should define what a champion is and what a champion is not. Colin, I'll kick this question your way. What's a champion? I know like the medic folks have some really great definitions of like coach versus champion and stuff, but when you're working with your team at Orum, what criteria are you giving them in order to determine whether someone is a champion or not?
And Jason, I appreciate that you're introducing it as, folks have a different definition. So I just, to call that out, I know that word's tossed around a lot. The champion and medic is really meant to provide a language framework for your business, right? So it's what you and your team and your company have aligned on as the definitions to look at a deal to help reduce risk in your forecast and help with discovery. And so folks will have different labels for a champion, right? And that's totally fine. The way we define champion internally and how other shops that follow medic would define champion, really there's 3 key ingredients. So somebody that has authority in the business, like they can get things done. They have influence, and with that influence, they are selling on your behalf, because they're a champion for you, and they're championing internally to sell your solution to their personal problems and the larger business problems. And the reason for that is they have skin in the game. They have a personal win. And so they're highly motivated to get your solution brought into the business. And so that's like, there's a specific person that has that authority, influence, or people. There are specific people. There could be a business level champion, a technical level champion, or multiple champions. And just to answer the second question, a difference between like a champion and a coach, right? A coach could be somebody that's really excited about what you do, and they might have a lot of high influence. They might have a really good sense of what we say the who's who in the zoo at the business, and they might be even helping you like map out the org chart and kind of point things out. But they don't have a ton of clout, and they don't have a ton of political capital that they can cash in to move money around and move budgets around and move decisions around. But they can go and introduce you to potential champions or let you know, hey, this is the technical champion in RevOps you need to win over. Hey, this is the business champion in demand generation that actually owns the P&L here. We just moved SDR team under marketing, and this is who owns it now. I freaking love what you guys do. I can't go pitch the CFO, but Sarah and Demand Gen can. So that's like a coach would be sharing those kind of pieces. So that's the way we define it. Again, orgs might define those terms differently, but that's the way we look at it.
So coach versus champion, I think I see something very similar, Colin, too, and like when I'm doing dealer reviews where someone thinks that this person is a champion, and it has less to do with their title, but I do see commonality in the title too. Like if you think about the people that have that influence in the organization, someone, let's say at a VP level, for example, if the person you're interacting with is not like able to get a meeting or doesn't communicate very often or doesn't even know like what some of the org wide or department wide priorities are, they're probably a coach and not a champion. But it's good to kind of understand the level of influence the person has that you're speaking with. Richard, Krysten, do you have any other thoughts around, like if we were to go a layer deeper here, ways that I could maybe test in a call whether someone is a champion or not?
I can. Krysten, do you want to ladies first?
The,
Am I allowed to say that anymore? Or is that now considered sexist? I apologize if it is. Sorry.
No, I view it as you're being polite, so that's fine. I think an important call out, because this was a mistake that I made early in my career, and maybe other people are like me. Sometimes we mistake someone who will take a meeting with us as a champion or like a first contact. Like if someone takes a meeting with us, that makes them a contact. It doesn't make them a champion. Like in addition to like having, like in my view, in addition to having an authority and influence, that's someone who's willing to stick their neck out for you. And I think, Colin, you were encompassing that in like sell internally, right? Like they are rooting for you. They are helping you. And so if they are blocking you, if they don't want to introduce you, if they're not helping you figure out what should come next and who should be involved, that's not a champion.
Yeah. This is something I learned when I was learning how to negotiate with procurement, but it's the same thing here, which is understanding their role and asking them, right? Simply being able to say, hey, just so I understand, Jason, what your role is here. Are you kind of like the examiner? Are you going to help navigate me through this process, assuming I become shortlisted? Are you going to present to your team? Like, what's your role in this decision? And that helps you determine what's going on. And if they start to get cagey at all, right? Or if they start to say, well, yeah, I'm your point of contact, you have to be willing to say, I don't mind you being my point of contact. I just need to know how this rolls, right? And I will say it that way because I run my own business. People listening might need to soften it up a little bit. I get it. So you can actually ask them, what is their role here? Yeah. Because you're right, is that it's all about getting access to authority, right? That's where we're all starting from in 99% of the cases, is what level of access can this person get me? And I love what Krysten said is, don't misinterpret or get happy ears based on their excitement to talk to you as if they are even a influencer at all, right? That's just not the case. So, and I love that analogy of, it's not a champion, it's a contact.
Yeah. So let's run through some of those situations then. So Clement Thomas asks in the chat, what do you do if the first contact doesn't want to introduce you to other stakeholders? Which I think there's a couple situations that can happen, especially if it's inbound, where a manager of something or someone that's been tasked to just basically talk to 10 vendors and gather some high level requirements. That's oftentimes a situation that I encounter quite a bit. There will be a small group of people sometimes that will come inbound that's like a manager and maybe a head of something. And they're again, the people that are researching, but not people that are actually going to have a lot of influence over, like they're not the people that are going to be using the product or managing the people that are going to be using it. So if we start to think about some of those situations, I'll kick this question your way, Richard. How are you thinking about and how do you advise reps when you're working with them going into
Yes.
that first call when I know that the person is not going to be a champion just based on how my interaction has gone with them and their role? How do I handle a situation like that, especially if they seem unwilling
Yeah.
to involve other people?
So the first thing is I encourage people to change their mindset, that knowing that this is a great place to practice. It's live practice. So you get to ask some questions of some people in a practice mindset, which actually helps you relax, right? Then this is the part where I would ask them questions because I know they're not going to have all the right answers. I want to ask them questions I know they don't have the answers to. I want to ask them questions. How do you currently solve this problem? Does your team like how they currently solve the problem? What's making you even want to show up and have this conversation? My first open-ended question after I do a respect contract is, so, Colin, before we jump in, what's happening over there to make you even want to take this call? Because now they think they're in control of the conversation and they're not. And so from there, I can dig in deeper. Oh, well, what does that mean? How is that impacting you? How bad is it? How important is it for your team to even want to solve this? Right. And I'm going to ask questions. Great. Well, how much time is being lost? How much time is being wasted? What should they be doing if they could do this? Like, I want to ask a ton of questions that I know they're not going to have great answers to. Right. I might even ask, is this a budgeted initiative yet or not? Even if I know it's not, or even if I know it is, because I don't get to ask that question a lot. So I want to ask questions that I know they don't have the answer to, because then that means I've done my job and they like me because I'm probing, and they will generally shortlist me.
I think the other big thing there too is that from a discovery standpoint, you're getting some of the big boxes checked that you need to check in order to get the deal too. Like it needs to be aligned with a business priority, like some sort of org-wide priority. You need to start to think about, okay, with that priority, how do they quantify and measure it?
Yep.
What is the problem that they're having? Hopefully in a way that we can measure it. And those are all questions that someone that doesn't have that type of influence, they're not going to know the answers to that question. And it also gives you a reason to involve other people too.
Yep.
And I think that's the big thing is if you just ask, can I get an intro to so-and-so, or can you involve so-and-so, and you don't give them a reason why, you're asking this person to put their political clout, I guess, on the line by inviting someone that they probably have a hard time getting time with. And you're not even giving them a reason why or demonstrating that it wouldn't be a waste of their boss's time to hop on a call with you. Love that. Krysten, do you have anything else to add in terms of, I think that one thing that we talk about too is like how we tell that story and explain the reason why we want people. And I have some thoughts on that too, and I forgot, I'll have to apologize to everyone. I forgot what my original question to Richard even was, but Krysten, do you have something to add?
There's two things. One is because the first call, we have no idea if they're going to be a champion, a coach, a blocker. We have no idea.
Yep.
And so I stole this language from Jamal Reimer because I think it's genius. So he comes to we come to the call and we say, maybe Jason is a director of sales, and I say, Jason, you know what? It's great to talk with you today. I've been corresponding with Sarah, your head of sales, and Mark, your head of marketing, and I'm excited to hear your perspective today. So I've communicated that I've already been in contact with multiple people in the org. And I'm not asking you to tell me who the head of sales is or who the head of marketing is, because I know who they are. And also, like, I'm here to hear your perspective. I'm not expecting you, I'm not allowing you to be a gatekeeper. And I think it just sets a little different expectation if we're here to just get information, if we're here to just get your perspective. I think it lessens the feeling of going around, because you're like, well, I've already gone to them. I've been messaging your head of sales for 6 months. Like, I'm not going around you. I'm just continuing with doing my job.
Yeah, it's really setting the stage that you're not going to allow yourself to be single-threaded. I think the other thing too is if it's an inexperienced buyer, which I don't know, like Richard, Krysten, because you guys also sell sales training and coaching, if you run into this, I find that even some of the more senior folks have not purchased sales training before or worked with an outside consultant or anything like that. So they're maybe unfamiliar with the actual buying process that their company would go through.
Then they've got the wrong title. They shouldn't have those titles. Like, I say this all the time. Like, if I run into a VP of sales and they got to go get approval for $5,000 of something, they're not a VP.
Oh yeah.
Like, seriously, get that title out of here.
So. Yeah. I'm going to give my take on this too. I dropped it into the chat. I think this story, when I've worked with reps, and I'm also doing this myself a ton, when you really get the multi-threading story down, buy-in is so much easier to get. So I'll kind of walk you through what this might sound like. So I might say something like, if I met with Colin, I'll say, if it's kind of towards the end of the call and we've had a good intro conversation, I might say, hey, Colin, we've actually gone through this just dozens of times with similar companies like your Gongs, your Medallias, your Zooms of the world. Do you mind if I share how we've gotten really great results around getting their AEs to self-source, 30+% of pipe and reduce reliance on SDRs? Every time you ask the question in that way, the person will always say yes. So it's like, do you mind if I share how these other companies have gotten the result that you said that you wanted during our conversation today? And then I'm giving a prescriptive recommendation from there. Usually we're getting the perspectives from, I noticed, Richard looks like heads up the SDRs. Someone like Krysten is usually going to, from an enablement standpoint, want to know about the content. And then at some point we'll want to involve so-and-so, your chief revenue officer. Are those all of the right people? Is there anyone else you feel that would be missing in order to get their feedback? And I just let them correct me and I kind of validate who I think the stakeholders are. And then I make a recommendation on next steps. And I think that oftentimes we underestimate the value and power of a good customer story. So if you just give a recommendation based on how other companies they want to be like go through a sales cycle with you, like that's super, super powerful. This requires like some thought coming into that call, which I think that's one of the big things you want to prep before any intro call is, what's another customer you've worked with that is likely in a similar situation or industry or org size to them? And I can make it very real. And I can give a recommendation based on the outcome. Because I think that's the big mindset shift is, if you're just multi-threading to sell the deal and sell it faster and sell a bigger deal, it's very selfish. Yeah. And it's hard to get someone to help you with that versus let's reposition this as, if you involve more of the right people on your side of the table here, you're going to get a better outcome. Because, I mean, according to Gartner, I think it's 54% of B2B buyers experience buyer's regret when it comes to software. Over half the time, they regret making that software purchase. So you're helping them make a better purchase and de-risk that purchase. Yeah, exactly what Richard said there. Okay, let's answer another question. Jordan, if you guys have questions, by the way, drop them into the Q&A. We would love to answer as many questions as possible, especially if it's a specific situation of yours. Jordan Manilieli, I think is how you pronounce your name. Sorry, Jordan. How early is too early to start multi-threading a deal? Krysten, I actually want to kick this question your way because you have some thoughts around what to do even prior to that first call. But how do you think about how early multi-threading happens?
And I think it depends on your deal size and your like cycle length and that sort of thing. But for me, like in a mid-market or enterprise deal, I like to identify, I know who, excuse me, I know who my 3 departments are, and I like to identify the VP of those departments. And once the meeting has been set, I like to reach out to them with an email saying, hey, I just want you to know, I just set a meeting with Daphne, your director of sales. The topic of the meeting is this. Executives don't always join meetings, especially at this stage. But I'm sending you an invite, and no worries if you don't want to come. I'm gonna send you a recap either way. So they know what's happening. You are giving them information. And I tell you what sometimes happens then is that when we tell the VP of one department that the VP of another department is looking into this, sometimes they're both trying to solve the same problem or different aspects of the same problem, but they don't know because they haven't been talking to each other. And they're like, oh my God, I had no idea Valerie was also trying to solve part of this problem. Like, yes, we need to get involved with this too. The larger the organization is, the more likely it is that the left hand may not know what the right hand is doing. And so sometimes that's even more of a value add at the beginning. But I like to reach out before the meeting even happens.
Yeah. That introductory email letting them know a conversation's going to be happening and that you'll keep them up to date. And then you get like an email thread going with that person too, which can be really good to just, keep them updated and that sort of stuff. Anything else, Richard, Colin, you would add in terms of how early to start multi-threading? I mean, a common fear people have running Krysten's play is that you're going to get a bad response, which I would say 1 out of maybe 20 times that happens to me where it kind of kills the deal in a good way, usually.
So here's the deal. Like, we create false belief systems all the time. To Jason's point, I think I might upset somebody. I might upset my first contact. I might upset that VP. Well, a couple of things. One, if it upsets any of them, imagine how hard it would have been to close that deal in the first place. So you just dodged a bullet. Secondly, it also sends a message that that executive sucks at being an executive if they're going to go poo-poo on that, or they're going to kill the messenger by going to your contact and saying, why is Richard, reaching out to me? Like, those are great signals to me, in my opinion. And I loved everything that Krysten says. You can do it on LinkedIn. You can do it by email. You just want to start some level of a conversation. And remember, early in the process, multi-threading is like prospecting, because you don't always know who the right person is. You've got one door in, but you might need to come in through the window, right? So it's not going to hurt. And even in Krysten's example where, the 2 VPs talk, I don't know that even happens. Like, maybe it happens once in a while, but maybe at the executive level it does. But at an enterprise company it does. But even then, I just don't think they communicate internally that much. So, but again, that's my belief system. I don't know if it's true or not. So.
I can't imagine, Richard, that they're communicating that much about a random sales call they have where they haven't even talked to the person yet. You know what I mean? It's like, unless they were like,
it depends on how big the initiative is, right? Like, I can see that, like, from Krysten's point, as I interpreted what she was saying, it could be a CRO and a VP of sales, right? Because I'm going to I might hear from the director of sales and I reach out to the VP of sales and the CRO, and they may connect and go, yes, keep talking to so-and-so or whatever. So it depends on how big the initiative is. And then, for lack of a better phrase, how big is the organization and the titles that exist within that revenue team.
Yeah. I mean, just to put a bow on that, I mean, having sold HR systems, which cover the entire company, versus now selling sales technology and a phone system for sales teams, I can sell to individual business units or like an SDR team, an enterprise AE team, a client success team. And those 3 teams may never actually speak with one another, especially in a mid-market or larger enterprise, right? They might have different sales tools that each one of them use. Like CS uses like a plan hat or a churn zero, and then sales uses outreach over here and sales loft over here. Whereas an HR system, to Richard's point, it's going to cover the entire business. The entire business is typically on Workday together. Right. So I think it does vary, what initiative you're tackling there. I think just the other kind of rule of thumb to keep in mind here is no champion, no deal. if you don't have a champion, you're never going to get a deal done. You need to find a champion and multiple champions. And the true test of a champion is that you guys are working together to navigate the decision process internally and bring others in to get that initiative solved. And remember, a champion wants to solve their problems far more than you want to make the sale, right? So they're highly motivated to bring others to the party to help you get through security and legal and introduce you to other folks in the business. So just, if you don't have someone doing that for you, you probably don't have a champion. Even if they have authority and influence, they actually might be a champion for your competitor or for status quo or for some other initiative that they want to put that budget towards. So you might have the right person, but they might not be a champion for you.
Good points all the way around. We're making good time, you guys. So we've talked about taking the lead, reverse engineering a good deal, champion building and testing. We've talked about selling the outcome versus selling the deal. How do I help the customer see how they can get a great outcome from our solution and use that as the reason to multi-thread? The next area I want to get into is oftentimes what I see in deals is that we do way too many things for free. And when I say free, I don't mean by not charging money for it. I'm saying things like delivering a demo that require a lot of effort and internal coordination with like an SE or someone else, where we put all of this effort and we don't even have an ask in return for it. And I think this is a perfect opportunity, whether it be demos, pricing, doing a pilot, providing references, discounts, etc. How am I using that as a way to get access to more of the stakeholders? So I want to talk about this piece. Richard, I'll kind of kick this question your way. This kind of like leverage during the buying journey. Do you want to comment real quick on, you have a take on the buyer's journey that I really love. And then the leverage piece, how we can use some of these things to, provide value through that demo or whatever it might be, but then to make sure also that we get something in return for it that'll help us advance the deal. How do you think of this?
All right, so I'll give you the quick take. There's no such thing as a buyer's journey. It does not
Yeah.
exist. It's a fallacy. I used to believe it. I used to teach it. There's only a buyer's experience. There's only a seller's journey that's created by sales and marketing. Even before someone speaks to us, whether it's an outbound or an inbound, they had some experience that existed that makes them curious about what it is we have to offer. So at that moment, they've had this experience, and then they start to go down this journey that we've created. It's just like Dorothy. She had a horrible experience in the Twister, and she had to go on this journey, but she didn't create the journey. She had an experience, and then she went down the yellow brick road, and she had a whole bunch more experiences through the journey, just like what we do. So that's my quick hot take on that piece. I do what's called pre-qualifying the demo, right? I'll say, hey, Colin, before we do this demo, just out of curiosity, this demo is going to go great, because if it doesn't, I'll never hear from you. What happens next? So that's the first step. So I pre-qualify the demo. And then he'll say, I goes to the team, or so-and-so this, or so-and-so that's. Like, great. So as you watch this demo, Colin, I want you to take the perspective of some of those other people. What would they be asking if they were here? Right. So that's the first thing that I will do about the demo. The second thing is, please, for the love of anything in the world, stop asking if that makes sense. Does that make sense? Stop asking. It's a terrible question. It gives you false answers. It does nothing for you, ever. Instead, ask, how does this compare to the way you're currently doing things? How much do you like this compared to the current way? And then the last thing is, please, everybody, rip up your demo scripts. Stop making them death by 1,000 mouse clicks. It's horrible. Demos are demos. They're not product training. When you go test drive a car, you're not trying to connect your Bluetooth phone. You are test driving the car. That's what a demo is. So and scene. I'm done.
So to double click on the pre-qualifying piece, this, hey, before we do this demo, let's say it goes great, what happens next? If they say, yeah, we would usually involve so-and-so and so-and-so, you're basically getting a commitment from them that, hey, so if I'm on the same page here, if you like what you have to hear today, next steps would be getting so-and-so and so-and-so on the next call. If you're getting a commitment from them.
I don't even go there. I don't
share.
even want to go
Okay.
down that road. I just want to say, great. I'm going to make a mental note, write it down, and I'm going to say, by the way, you said this is going to go to so and so. What would they say if they saw this right now?
Yeah.
That's what I want to know, because I already
Yeah.
know what they're going to go do. I already know they're going back to the team. I already know who the skeptics are going to be. I might ask that skeptic question again. By the way, let's say that you like this demo and you want to go take it back. Who are the skeptics going to be when it comes to this demo? What should we be showing you so you can tell them in the demo?
Yeah.
From the demo, excuse me.
Colin, you had talked about this a little bit in our prep as well. How do you recommend and work with your reps to leverage some of these gives, like the demos, custom pricing, pilots, the insights that the pilots generate? How do you leverage that to get more access?
Yeah, whether it's more access or reducing risk in the deal, what we train our team on is you have 4 pieces of leverage in every evaluation, every deal. One is demo, which Richard just brilliantly did a mock role play of how he might leverage, before I show you this demo, some of the gets that I want, right? I want more about decision process, who's who in the zoo. The second one is price, right? And we're talking, again, more mid-market enterprise level products where price isn't necessarily on the website. You might typically have more of a custom price proposal. So giving away demo, giving away price is another opportunity to get more information or get more people involved into the evaluation. So that could be an alignment between your VP and their VP, your head of demand gen and their head of demand gen, your head of sales ops and their head of sales ops, whomever it might be. It's a great opportunity for peer-to-peer. Pilot, if you have a pilot that you give, leveraging that as another moment to make sure, have I flushed out more of Medic or your version of that? We call ours MedFic, by the way. The F is for financing or funding. So every company has your own language framework, but you have your framework that you use to reduce the risk. So you have to look at where you still have risk in your deal, whether it's people or just understanding of financing or decision process or decision criteria. So you have demo, price, pilot, and the fourth one is, let me, my fingers right here, is after the pilot, insights. What can you teach them about their company, right? From that pilot or from that technical valuation, what insights? And for us, we typically provide a whole report on their state of data, their state of sales performance, like what objections their business sees, how the reps are performing on those objections, right? So it's a really key report that we provide that people want access to because it's specific to them and their business. And so in order to get those insights from the pilot, it'll be the last piece that we really want to align on anything we might be missing in this evaluation that we haven't gotten thus far. So once you've given those 4 pieces up, it's really hard to ask for something. Like, what do you have left aside from maybe your likability and hopefully the fact that they really want to solve that problem quickly, right? Which could be like time to implementation, but those are some of the key ones that we focus on.
Love it. So I think the key here is that you're doing these things that are extra effort and value for the prospect. Like, make sure you have some sort of ask in return. It's a very okay thing to do, to have an ask, especially like a pilot. Understanding, like, I think it's a good way to kind of an acid test for a champion, so to speak, is like what outcome they would want to accomplish during the pilot in order to want to move forward with actually signing up. Like, what is the criteria for the pilot? And oftentimes, if you're talking to a person that doesn't know the answer to that question, it's a great way to get other people involved. So we got leveraging your gift to gets. I want to make sure we have time for this last one, the leadership angle. And I'll kick this question your way, Krysten. So if we're thinking as a sales org, how we reinforce a lot of the stuff that we've talked about today, I think one place that happens, Krysten, is during deal reviews. What are some of the questions that a manager could be asking a rep during a deal review, or that a rep could be coaching themselves around to kind of score the deal around, like, multi-threading?
Okay, well, I'm going to flip the question because I've never been a sales manager because I have children and that sounds like a terrible job. But from a rep's perspective, what I want to do, and hopefully as a rep, hopefully you're coming into deal review with an agenda of things you want to get done. And for multi-threading, I want my executive to start a separate line of communication with their executives. like we don't have to do multi-threading all ourselves. I like if it's a big deal, long deal cycles, I like aligning like like a solution consultant or a solution architect with their technical resource, like peer-to-peer alignment. And so I have templates that I use so that I can just forward it to the CEO that has like the person, prospect's name, their title, their email, their LinkedIn URL, and then like here's the 2-paragraph introduction. And the counterintuitive thing is I don't want to be CC'd on that. I want the two leaders to be able to have a separate line of communication, because leaders will communicate with each other differently than they will with a rep. And I had a situation where there was a leader that we did that executive alignment. I never spoke to him. He never came to a meeting. He opened all of my recap emails. He dealt with my VP of marketing. And in the end, he came in and saved a deal for us. I never spoke to him, ever.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just want to real quick, like a quick story for a deal for us on that is having that, especially that CEO to CEO level alignment. Let's say you can't get something done at end of quarter, end of year with your champion, texting your champion. If your CEOs have already aligned and you say, hey, do you think our CEOs can get it done? Because you've already earlier in the campaign have gotten it done. And a quick story, our CEO was able to get a deal done last minute with their CEO when the champion and legal and procurement all said it wasn't going to happen. But at the CEO level, they can get stuff done. So a great call out, Krysten, the way you approach it.
I mean, it's such like a good reason why you need to be multi-threaded with people that have that type of authority, because a lot of times they can just circumvent a lot of the procurement and legal stuff that you might be dealing with. Richard, you got to take on this.
Yeah. So there's one question in the deal review, and it also goes back to what you ask in terms of the rep coaching themselves. If I'm a leader, I ask one question of Colin. Colin, what's the one thing preventing this deal from closing this month? And the issue is there's never just one thing. That all those answers tell me where I need to get multi-threaded. The reason I ask the question that way is because if we say, so what's preventing this deal? It's like, well, so-and-so, and then so-and-so. But if I get someone to focus on one thing, interestingly enough, your mind comes up with 10. And then you can get real about where this deal really is. So that's the first thing. The other thing too is, and sort of going maybe against the grain with Krysten, is if I have to type up something to send to my leaders about deals, then something's wrong in our process, because that information should somewhere be in the CRM. And my leader, by the way, if you're a sales leader, you shouldn't be asking any question that can be answered by you looking in the CRM. Don't give me fucking, death by click and, field creep, and then ask me questions that I've already put in the CRM. That's lack of accountability by that leader to do their job.
Yeah.
I don't care how busy they are.
Yeah. I love that take. And to Kristen's point, in my experience working with reps, probably 99% of the time, the leader wants them to write an email for them and needs to be like coached on how to actually involve themselves in the deal.
Right.
Which
then I'm going to copy
sucks.
my leader. I'm going to copy my leader on every email I send to my prospect and client and say, there it is. Go for it. I'm not going to go write a summary. Granted, I could probably take those and throw them into GBT, but then so could my leader. So
yeah. So that's it for today, you guys. We've kind of done the broad brushstrokes here of like, we need to take the lead, right? We need to coach the buyer and provide a perspective on how to buy and how to get a great income. We have to have a great story, a customer story, to get them excited to introduce other people to the team and talk about how that de-risks the deal. We need to have some good plays and things like that we can run. There's also a component of leveraging give to gets. And then we talked about the leadership angle. Real quick, before we take off, appreciate everyone's interaction today and all the engagement. We could just go around the horn real quick. Krysten, we'll start with you. Where can people go to connect with you and get more information on what you're all about?
Yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn, and it has a link to my website and everything else. So pretty simple. Thanks for having me, Jason.
Yeah, you bet. So connect with Krysten. We got links we're dropping into the chat. Richard has got a book out. Anything else you want people people to check out Richard, we'll drop that link for the book in there again.
Yeah,
too.
this is crazy. I'll even put in the chat 415-596-9149. Yes, that's my real cell phone number. It's the number my kids ignore when I call. So yeah, I'll text me first to let me know that you found us here. But yeah, I'll talk to people, or you can find me on LinkedIn as well.
Cool.
I'll
Colin?
throw in a last plug. If you need a phone system to call Richard on, check out Orum. ORUM as in mother.com. We have a free trial up to 500 dials, no credit card required. You can see what Orum is like in the sales floor experience. Give it a try, and you can give Richard a call using Orum. So
There you go.
drop him a voicemail.
And if you want some help building talk tracks for that, visit outboundsquad.com. We have a outbound sprint training program starting. So there you go. Pretty meta for you guys today.
Content, by the way. I love your script content, Jason.
Appreciate it. Thank you, everyone. That's all we got for you. Happy
Thanks, bye,
multi-threading.
everybody.
Thank you, Jason.
Yep, we'll see you.
Thanks, Krysten.
Later, everyone.
Richard. Thanks, everyone.
See you, everybody.
Bye.